Hello and welcome to my channel. I am so excited. I'm recording this halfway through June, so I'm a little bit behind schedule, but this is my May reading wrap up, which was my smallest month so far. I think I average about 12 books a month, depending on, if they're massive books, sometimes it'll be closer to 10. I only read 6, and I feel like maybe there's one I forgot, which then is probably means it probably wasn't a great book if I forgot about something I read, but May was a crazy busy schedule personally and from a work perspective anyway, so I actually believe it probably is only 6. And what's interesting is I read a series that I really didn't like that much, but I just wanted to power through it. And I find that when I'm reading a book I'm not a big fan of, it takes me longer and I read less books because I'm just not as motivated to get through it. And so I think that kind of happened this month too. I'm still getting used to the short hair, by the way. Like, what is this? Is just like bloop, bloop. Anyway, we're going to power through this. Okay, so this is my May reading wrap up. I hope you enjoy. So, May, first of all, I love this shirt. I will tag it in the comments where I got this. My husband got it for me, but it's the Mass Ladies, Sarah J. or Mass. Again, I can't pronounce names to save my life. So, anyway, yes, love the shirt. So fun. Thanks to my husband for getting this for me. He also got me one that was so fun. It's like a matchbox. It says slow burn romance, and it's super fun. I'll wear it on a video sometime, I'm sure. But anywho, let's dive into May. So the first series I read in May, which I am so confident is the reason why I only read 6 books, is a popular series, but it just was not quite for me. And I'll go through why, and I'll kind of talk about it a little bit too. But that is the Serpent and Dove series, and I'll do each book individually. So the first one is Serpent and Dove. It is the Serpent and Dove series. It's a trilogy. So in this book, we have it's sold as like witch versus witch hunter, and that's like the romance situation. And so I will say it is a true enemies to lovers situation, which, if you know anything about me, I love those, but I'm very picky. Like, it has to be true enemies to lovers. It can't be, person one thinks the other person's an enemy where it's not. Like, I always use the example Feyre Rhysand. Feyre was never Rhysand's enemy, but Rhysand was Feyre's at one point. So it's like a one-sided enemies relationship, where this is like, this book, Serpent and Dove, is true. They are true enemies to the core. And what's interesting about this too is this isn't like a fated mate situation. I'm actually starting to really dislike fated mates because it's kind of a cop-out sometimes, and I feel like it makes the relationship seem almost less believable because they're like forced to love each other because of that weird bond they've got. So this isn't fated mate. So it's interesting to see the growth and progression of their relationship. But this isn't like supposed to be a review video, even though I'm kind of giving a mini review because I obviously have the thoughts. So with this book, Serpent and Dove, you have Louise LeBlanc, who is she's kind of poor. She's been living on the streets. She is a witch who turned away from her coven. And I don't think I can tell you why. I think telling you why would kind of be a spoiler, so I won't tell you why, but she ran away from her coven. She has separated herself from the witches. She has a good friend named Coco. She has a couple other key characters who pop up, but she is on the streets. And then we have Reed, who is a chasseur. Again, can't pronounce things to save my life, people. Chasseur. I don't know. And his whole goal, he works for the church, and his whole goal is to find witches and kill witches. Like, that is part of his thing. The landscape of the books is interesting because it definitely brings in, like, it features like real life religion. So it's not a made up religion. Like, it's definitely like Catholicism is kind of the vibe that this church is giving me, but it talks about the Bible and like stories from the Bible. And so that was kind of interesting for me, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. I prefer made up religion as opposed, if your book is not rooted in reality, then I kind of prefer if you don't bring in real things to it. So that didn't really sit well with me. But so it's like this like Catholic type of religion, and also witch hunting. So think about it like the Salem witch trials, where there really were witches. Like, it kind of gave me that vibe. So maybe like Catholic plus Puritan type of. I'm not as familiar with the ins and outs of the Puritan religion, but it kind of sometimes gave me the there's a famous book. It's like a super famous book in literature. It's a play. It's about witches who are burned at the stake, but they weren't even really witches. I can't even remember what it is, but it gave me that vibe, essentially. So it's weird. It's a fantasy, made up world, but it does have real life religion in it, which didn't quite sit right with me, to kind of miss the mark for me there. And so, on top of that, there's also then the witch hunting part of the church. We need to burn the witches are bad. And what happens is the witch Louise and the Chaucer Reed are put into a situation, not on purpose, where kind of Reed is compromised, and the only solution is for them to get married. And so they are forced to marry. And so now you have witch and witch hunter married, but he doesn't, at this time, he doesn't know that she's a witch. He just thinks she's a criminal. So it's interesting. So there are a lot of things that, and it's why I read the book, is super interesting things going on. Where it kind of fell flat for me a little bit is just the relationship really wasn't really believable. My continuing plot issue or characterization issue with all three books was the fact that the main female character to me seemed really childish. And like sometimes she gave me Aelin vibes. If you've ever read Throne of Glass, she kind of gave me some Aelin vibes. If you've read Throne of Glass, you know Aelin just kind of goes AWOL, does her own thing. But it was like Aelin vibes with temper tantrums and like teenager. And she is young. She's like 17, 18 years old. So it kind of is aligned, but it was distracting how immature I thought her character was at points. And then the main male character so rigid in his beliefs, which is part of the point, but then it got to be like overly, like it was like overkill. It kind of got to be obnoxious. So we have, in my opinion, this like immature character with this obnoxious character, and they're supposed to eventually, have a love story, and it just wasn't believable, and it missed the mark for me. So that was the first book. The second book, Blood and Honey. This is one, so apparently the series was supposed to be a duology. So Blood and Honey was supposed to be it. But I guess the author along the way changed, made it a trilogy, and this is definitely a scenario where it should have been two books total. Because this book is super filler. I had a hard time getting through this book because very little things happen. You meet new characters and you learn a little bit more about the world. But if you think about how the cadence of books, in order for it to be a trilogy, it has to be a really, I think it does have to have a complex plot. And this plot wasn't complex enough to call for three books. And usually when then you have books with complex plots, usually sometimes they need five books because you need the first three to get through the first hurdle, and then the second two get you through kind of like the end game hurdle. If you think about the cadence of like Sarah J. Maas books are like that. Actually, all of her books are like that. Well, we don't know about Crescent City. From Blood and Ash was like that. So there's a lot of these popular series where the cadence is you have this end villain, this end game thing, but you have a not mini villain. You have like villain part one that you get through the first couple books, and then villain part two you get to the main one at the end of the series. And for it to be a trilogy, though, if it's only a trilogy, you have to have a really strong villain character to pull you through all three books. And the problem with this is you didn't. The villain character was very strong, but in the situation of this, I felt like the villain character could have been killed in the first book and it would have been fine. And so it kind of really felt drawn out, and for this to be then moved into three books, it was hard. So what I liked about the second book was that we saw new characters, which was great and interesting, and you learn more about like the witch world, and there's different types of witches and different types of kind of mystery being type of things. But ultimately it really didn't do anything with the plot, and I still continue to have the issue with the immaturity of the female main character and the main male character, and just not believing that was supposed to be a believable love story. Then we get to the third book. This is Gods and Monsters. And this one I think is the best one of the series. So one of the reasons why is because the plot did get a little bit more. And it was super, like the books are multiple point of view, but in this book in particular, it's a lot of points of view, and it kept it moving considering there was not a ton going on. Going from character to character really filled the time and made it interesting because you do have characters in different parts of the world, and so you kind of got to check in with them. If this was if this was one singular point of view, I don't think I could have read the books. So I think having the multiple point of view really helped. Ultimately, like I said, I think it was interesting. I think the rating I totally gave this in total out of 5 was a 3 out of 5, which is like middle of the road. It was entertaining. It had a lot of issues with for me, and it's funny as I talk through it, I'm like, I feel like I liked it less. But I think this is why my May was so slow, because I just wasn't feeling it. Just wasn't my thing. And I do think, as I mentioned, the religious aspect of it being rooted in real things was very distracting and weird. And I do think, like, this is supposed to be a fun book about witch hunter, but it got oddly political, I felt like, and it made it not fun. Like, you have to decide as an author, are you writing it to make a point, or and you can do both, right? But the thing is it just wasn't done well, and it got kind of preachy about things, and it got to be distracting. There were too many things to distract from the overall story for me, between the characterization, the political points I think the author was trying to make, and I'm just like, dude, this is supposed to be a young adult book. And it's also young adult. I think it was a little too spicy, I think, at some points for young adult. But I was like, this is not the appropriate medium, I think, for just it was weird to me. But you may really enjoy it. A lot of people really enjoy it. If you do, tell me why. I'd love to know. And I may have to lower my rating after like just kind of ranting through it for so long. But it's not fair for me to give a book a rating just because it ruined my month in terms of numbers. So that's not fair. Okay, moving on. So then I read a series that I am loving right now, White Horse Black Knights. I'll put both up here, followed by Silver Wings Golden Games. This is the God-Kissed Bride series by Evie Marceau. Can I go back real quick? Obviously I can, because I'm in control of this. So real quick, going back, I did want to make a point. Going back to the Serpent and Dove series, one thing that was really interesting that I forgot to mention, because I'm seeing it on my notes here, it gave me like Hunchback of Notre Dame theme. There's no hunchback, but if you think of the setting of Hunchback of Notre Dame and like the gypsies being hunted, and it's France, it wasn't noted as France because again it's a made up world, but it was definitely French influence in terms of the language, but it had that vibe to it. So I wanted to make sure I share about that because I did really enjoy that about the book. Okay, going back, we are back here with these books. So White Horse Black Knights, Silver Wings Golden Games. With these books, it was so fun to read. I loved them way more than I thought I would. This is one of the things that's kind of been on my TBR for a while that I was like, yeah, maybe I'll read it. And I'm so glad that I did. It is about a woman who is sold off into marriage. So it's an arranged marriage situation, but in order to honor a goddess of the world, she needs to make the journey from her home to her new husband, who's like, he's not a prince, but he's high up, and then there is royalty, so he's related to royalty. So so he is higher up. In order to honor the goddess, she has to mimic the goddess's journey, and the goddess traveled from point A to point B on horseback, completely naked, to get to her true love, to prove that I come to you just as me as I am. Sounds great. Super awful for our main character because she's never met this guy before. She's seen him once, like from afar kind of thing. And so she's not really sure who she's marrying, and her future husband sends his like right-hand man to escort her naked on a horse for like 21 days or something like that. Ridiculous, just completely nude. And I'm thinking like, this can't be real. This isn't going to work. And no, that's exactly how it is. And it is so interesting. So once the book got started, I was like, how is she going to hold my attention? Because I don't like the travel books. I get really bored. I like being in actual homes and settings. I don't like just being in the wilderness for long periods of time. But she did keep it engaging. And it's interesting because this is an arranged marriage, but then you have this guy who comes to escort her, and clearly things start happening, get interesting with them. And so it's also then forbidden romance. And so that was very interesting because this is truly, I mean, when I talk about like enemies to lovers, yeah, is it true enemies to lovers, or is it a one-sided thing? It's a similar thing here. Forbidden romance, sometimes I feel like it's overused, and sometimes it's used in a situation, yeah, that's not really forbidden. No, in this situation, it's legit forbidden what's going on, and it makes the the interactions between the characters and their motivations for their actions, and it just makes it all very, very interesting. And I really enjoyed it, especially because we're literally just with those two characters the entire book. It's like her journey through the wilderness and nude, horseback. Although she has really long hair and she uses it to strategically cover herself, which is nice. But it was interesting. I thought it was going to be boring, and it wasn't. I just thought it was so well done. And then when you get to the second book, the Silver Wings and Golden Games book, I just thought it was a great sequel. It does end in a cliffhanger, and the next book I think is scheduled to come out in October. So it's kind of painful there, but I think I can, with how the cliffhanger is, I can already see some of the things that are going to happen in book 3, and I'm super excited about that. But so book 2 is what happens after the journey, and so now she is in a situation where now they're not married yet, but she meets her fiance, and she still has feelings for this other person, and her fiance is not, like, her fiance just made her go naked through the wilderness. Like, clearly he's not a good guy, and he's not. But it's very interesting then seeing the dynamics between the different characters, because the main characters, I can't spoil it obviously, but the two main characters at the end of the first book go through some things, and now in book 2 they're dealing with those things, while she's also now dealing with an arranged marriage that she doesn't want. And there's also magic involved in this world. So she's what's called God kissed, I think is what it is. So that means some people are regular humans, other people were given some sort of power from gods for reasons can't really explain. And her power is that she can talk to animals, and that's one of the reasons why her fiance wanted her, was because she is God kissed and he was trying to kind of collect power. So it's very interesting. It's very good. I do recommend it. So that is The God-Kissed Bride, book 2 and 3. Books 1 and 2. Sorry, book 3 is coming out in October. Okay, so the last book that I read this month, I was so excited about it because I had no idea what to think going into it. It's actually a book that I looked at multiple times and wasn't sure of. So it is Till Death by Miranda Lynn. This book is, so when you read the back of it, it's in this world where the gods left them. Everyone has immortality for 100 years, so you cannot die for 100 years, and then you just die once you expire, essentially, at 100 years. And you have these gifts that you have two individuals who are gifted by life and death, these entities. You have the Life Maiden and the Death Maiden. And the main character of this story is the Death Maiden. And essentially, the Life Maiden has a dedicated human, and once the Life Maiden dies, you get a new Life Maiden. Once the Death Maiden dies, you get a new Death Maiden. So there's always one of each, and there's always just one of each, right? And so in this story, we follow the Death Maiden, and she is an assassin for Death. So the point of the Death Maiden is Death is allowed to have his person kill people within their 100 years. So you can die, you just can only die by the Death Maiden. So she's feared. She's also royalty, and everyone knows who she is. So it's interesting. She's a princess. She's the crown princess of her kingdom, essentially, and she is the only person who can kill people and have them actually die. And she doesn't have a say in it. So it's a forced assassin situation. Death comes to her and tells her, you must kill this person, and she's like compelled to do it. And then you have the Life Maiden, who can restore fertility, who can heal, and because you can still get sick, you can still, like, if you have a war situation, you can still get brutally injured, you just can't die, and so you would live life brutally injured. So the Life Maiden then can heal those kinds of things. So it's definitely a light and dark situation. And in this book, the Life Maiden is missing. And so a huge mystery of this book is, where's the Life Maiden? And the Death Maiden is trying to find the Life Maiden because she's lived a really hard life. People don't like her, obviously, because she kills people. And it's scary if you see her show up, because you don't want to be the one who's on her list. And it's also not understood. Like, people don't understand the parameters of it. They don't understand that she's forced into it. They don't know that Death is controlling her in that way. They think that she just kind of likes to kill people and does whatever she wants. And that's not the case. So she's severely misunderstood, and she's trying to find the Life Maiden to be able to do something good for society, since she feels like she can only do bad things. So enter our main male character. He is he's cursed. He's very mysterious. He forces the Death Maiden to marry him. It's very interesting. When I read, this reading the book, and I was like, how is she going to do this? And the author does it brilliantly. It's so well done. And, I was like, how would she not know who she's marrying? Because she marries the wrong person accidentally. She marries this guy instead of, she's supposed to marry a prince, and she marries the wrong guy. And like, how does that happen? Well, it happens, and it's really well written, I would say. And so by marrying him, it causes a whole slew of issues, and he hates her. Like, this is true enemies, lovers, and you don't quite know why. It's not enemies, lovers, I should say, because he actually, no, it kind of is, because then she hates him because he just ruined her life by accidentally marrying her, and then he hates her, and he kind of forced her into marriage as like a payback type thing because she'd killed some of his family. It's very fascinating and it's so fun. It is a standalone book with spin-offs. So if you're a standalone person, usually I'm not, because usually I think a book, I like complex plots. So usually one book doesn't do it enough for me. This book does a great job. Where this book lost me though, the ending. So it felt so unique until the ending. And I like to say if Moulin, because it also has a burlesque setting, if Moulin Rouge, Caraval, Serpent and Dove, even though I just complained about it, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of character dynamics. Serpent and Dove and One Dark Window. So, okay, Moulin Rouge, One Dark Window, Caraval, and Serpent and Dove, all of those combined kind of make up this book. I'm trying to point to where it's going to be. Um, and so it has elements of each of those, and this book gave me vibes slightly here and there from each of those, and it was just such a fun read until the ending, because the ending does get a little bit more like Greek mythology, and I'm not a huge fan of like the actual gods stories. Like I don't like seeing Hades actually show up and Persephone. I've read Hades and Persephone stories, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of Zeus and Aphrodite. That's not my thing. I prefer high fae fantasy as opposed to like the gods and monsters type of fantasy. And this book felt so unique and different until you enter the ending and they get a little bit of that Greek or Roman god inspiration. So that lost me a little bit, but it's so worth it. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. It's so worth it, and I highly recommend it. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, so go get it while you can. Read it. Let me know what you think. And yeah, that is it. That was my May. So only 6 books. I talked a little bit more on the books than I probably would have just because I only had 6 books, so why not? I just feel like I just reviewed all 6 of them. But if you've read any of them, let me know. I am so excited partway through June, for my June wrap-up, which I will do because I skipped my April wrap-up because it was like 14 books and I would have had to do it in May, which I was super busy. But for June, I read Dawn of the Cursed Queen, which is book 3 in I don't know, it's actually probably over here somewhere. The book of, I don't know, Gods and Monsters. It's book 3 of the series, the Book of Azrael. So incredibly good. I was so happy with it. It was better than the second one. It was so good. And I've already read Fate of the Sun King, which I have a lot of feels about. So I'm probably going to be doing a lot of content on that because I have a lot of things to share and I want people to chat with me about it. So anyway, that is May. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.